The loss of Robbie Ray is going to hinder the Mariners rotation for the rest of 2023. I know YouTube comments, oh, it's a good thing, Robbie Ray's not that good. Listen, losing a perennial 200 innings pitched, 200 strikeout pitcher, yeah, that's a big deal, whether you guys want to admit it or not. So in this video, we're going to talk about the trades the Mariners could make to somehow find a way to manage this loss of Robbie Ray. Now, we've talked a little bit about the in-house options in a video prior, and it actually turned out that Easton McGee came in and threw like 6 2/3 shutout innings. I'm not sure if Easton McGee is going to be able to do that every time out. I'd say it's highly unlikely, and I'd say what we saw to Easton McGee in his first time through the rotation, probably the best we'll ever see out of him. Could he keep going and be the Mariners' 5th starter? Sure, why not? But in this video, we're going to look at some other guys around the league the Mariners could trade for as we get closer to the trade deadline. We made a video about Shohei Ohtani, so I'm not going to put him in this list. In this list, we're going to talk about 4 or 5 different pitchers, along with some sort of way to, I guess, offset the Mariners' offensive woes so far. First, we have to start with the absolute dumpster fire that is our friends at the Chicago White Sox. At the time of recording, the Chicago White Sox are 7-20. Even though this team has some pretty good players on it, they just cannot put it together. And I think the Mariners and the White Sox match up pretty well, and I think a lot of Mariners Twitter does too. I've seen this thrown around a lot. We'll talk about the guys that we've heard the most about. First, let's start with Lucas Giolito, one of the former top prospects in baseball who is now on the White Sox. He's a right-handed pitcher. He'll be 29 in the middle of July. Giolito is off to an okay start. He has a 4.15 ERA in 34.2 innings pitched. He has 34 strikeouts and he has a 1.10 ERA plus. Now, Lucas Giolito is in the final year of arbitration for his contract and he is making $10.4 million in 2023. He will be a free agent at the end of this year. Another guy on the White Sox we need to talk about is Lance Lynn, the old vet Lance Lynn. Lynn is going to be 36 years old in just about a week or two, and overall, I don't know if Lance Lynn is the option. He's a little bit on the older side, and if we could get him at the prime of his career, it would have been perfect. But unfortunately, he's probably on the other side of that. In 2022, Lynn has a 7.52 ERA, albeit in just 26 innings. He has 32 strikeouts and a 61 ERA plus. However, throughout his career, he's at a 1.16 ERA plus. He has a 3.58 career ERA, and he's a big innings eater. He's been able to rack up over 200 innings a couple different times in his career, and we've seen a lot of Lance Lynn throughout our time as Mariners fans. In 2021, he finished as a Cy Young 3, a Cy Young 6 in 2020, and a Cy Young 5 in 2019. For Lance Lynn, they're paying him quite a hefty amount of money. In 2023, he's making $18.5 million, and there is a club option for $18 million in 2024. There's a $1 million buyout on this club option. Of these two guys for the Mariners, I think that Lucas Giolito probably makes the most sense. He's younger. I think he has more upside at this point than Lance Lynn. Obviously, Lance Lynn's probably on the latter part of his career, and you also come along with a higher price tag for Lance Lynn. Again, Giolito's still getting paid $10.5 million, so by no means is he cheap, but he's a lot cheaper than Lynn at almost double that. With that being said, however, the Mariners have the payroll to cover this with relative ease. But the White Sox have more players that the Mariners could be interested in, and that includes Gavin Sheets, Eloy Jimenez, Jake Berger, just from an offensive standpoint. Now, the thing is, Yohan Moncada is going to be coming back from an injury relatively soon, and the White Sox roster is just going to face some sort of a crunch. The White Sox need to start selling off on some of these guys. I think this could be a time for the Mariners to capitalize by getting a pitcher and someone who can help out their offense as well. Starting with Gavin Sheets, he is a right fielder and first baseman. He just turned 27 years old, and he will not be a free agent until 2028. So far in 2023, Sheets is hitting .293, .383, .439 with a 128 OPS plus with 2 home runs and 7 RBI. Sheets has been pretty good. Then there's Jake Berger, who is a third baseman and second baseman. He also just turned 27, and he won't be a free agent until 2029. In 2023 thus far, Jake Berger's off to a 259, 349, 722 start with a 187 OPS plus. He's hit 7 home runs with 13 RBI. And finally, there is Eloy Jimenez, the big part of that Cubs and White Sox deal that sent Jose Quintana packing. Eloy will be a free agent in 2025. He's just 26 years old, but Eloy isn't off to nearly as good of a start. In just 19 games for Jimenez, he's hitting 181, 253, 306 with a 55 OPS plus. He has 2 home runs and 7 RBI. When Moncada comes back, one of these guys is either going to have to go to the minor leagues or get traded. It's just the way it's going to be. Moncada's probably going to be at third base for them. That means Jake Berger or Gavin Sheets are probably going to have to DH a lot of the time. And then what do you do with the other guy? Because you already have Andrew Vaughn over there at first base. It just makes so much sense to get rid of one of these guys in a trade if you're the White Sox to maybe help sweeten the pot a little bit. Let's say you're trading Lance Lynn, trying to get rid of that $18 million contract. If you're trading Lance Lynn, maybe throw in like a Jake Berger or an Eloy Jimenez or something in there to hopefully get some more prospects back instead of having to cover so much of that salary. If I'm being honest with you, I don't know what the White Sox would want in return. This team is very, very confusing to me. I would think they would want some young guys, but maybe they still think that they're in it. I'm not really sure what the White Sox would want. Next up is our friends with the Rockies, and I'm going to start with German Marquez. I think he is one of the most fascinating pitchers in baseball. Unfortunately, he's injured quite a bit. In 2023, Marquez just went on the injured list. I'm not sure when he'll be back, so maybe this deal doesn't make as much sense now as it would have maybe a week ago, but he has 20 innings pitched. He has struck out 17, and he has an ERA plus of 101. Throughout his career, he has an ERA plus of 111 and a 4.41 ERA. But of course, he's pitching in Coors Field. Throughout his career, German Marquez has a 5.07 ERA at home and a 3.8 away. Yeah, the Coors Field effect has definitely hit German Marquez pretty hard. Marquez is a free agent after the 2024 season, so you would have him the rest of 2023 and then into 2024 with a team option if you wanted it. On top of that, you could also try to get CJ Cron in that deal, who's also not a free agent until 2024. This is a guy that will probably be a good DH for you and also be able to give Ty France days off at first base. In 2022, Cron has a 74 OPS plus. He does have 5 home runs with 11 RBIs. He's hitting 222, 255, 422. Cron is not off to the greatest start, especially in Coors Field, but throughout his career he has a 112 OPS plus, and I think he'd be a good addition to this lineup, maybe in like the 6th spot. In terms of salary, this is like a kind of similar situation to what it would be if you were going for Lance Lynn and then one of the younger guys, with Marquez making $15 million this year, and CJ Cron making $7.25 million this year, so you're paying probably $21-22 million for these two guys. For the Rockies, pitching is always a premium, so you could send them 1 or 2 of the younger pitching prospects, maybe like a Taylor Dollard and like a Emerson Hancock or something. It's a lot to pay, especially for guys that are only going to be around for a few years. I think that the Rockies probably aren't going anywhere in that division. Again, the Rockies are one of the most confusing teams in all of baseball. They let Nolan Arenado walk, and then they sign Chris Bryant. I don't know what the hell the Rockies are doing, and neither do they, so I don't know what they would want. Probably pitching, knowing them. Also, going back to the White Sox for just a second, I think that either Liam Hendriks or Kendall Graveman could also be options to trade for from the Mariners. Obviously, Hendriks just beat cancer. By the way, congrats to him. That is amazing. He will be on his way back to the Major League mound soon. And Kendall Graveman, we all know who he is. He's been around the Mariners before. Hendriks has a club option in 2024, so if you wanted to, you could keep him around that long for a few more years. Of course, he's getting paid $14 million this year. That would, of course, be prorated from whatever he's made already. And over the next 2 years, Kendall Graveman is making $16 million. Again, we already know what we get out of Kendall Graveman, so that's another small price to pay. And then there are the Detroit Tigers and Eduardo Rodriguez, another guy that makes a lot of sense for the Mariners. A left-handed pitcher on a team that probably is going nowhere with the Detroit Tigers, another team in the AL Central. And I think Eduardo Rodriguez is a guy that we would have really liked to have seen on the Mariners a few years ago, and now it just makes even more sense. Rodriguez just turned 30 years old. He signed through 2026. He nearly threw a perfect game earlier in the year. He's been really good in 2023 here with a 2.32 ERA and 31 innings pitched. He has 25 strikeouts and a 186 ERA plus. Rodriguez does have an opt-out, however, after this year, so this would be a big risk to take, and you're still going to be paying him a lot of money even if he doesn't opt out. He's making $14 million this year, $18 million next year, $16 million, and then $15 million through 2026. That's only if he doesn't opt out and decides to continue to play for the team. If he does decide to opt out, then that means that the Mariners would have given up a lot for just a few months of Eduardo Rodriguez. For the Mariners in this deal, from an offensive perspective, maybe someone like Jonathan Scope would be a guy that you could look at and say, hey, maybe this will help us not have to throw in so many prospects. We're taking on a lot of salary here from the Detroit Tigers. Jonathan Scope hasn't been all that great, but he can play second base and he can play first base. Let's take a look at his numbers. Scope is 31 years old. He's a free agent after this year. So far in 2023, he's hitting 205, 286, 227 with a 50 OPS plus. He's off to a really slow start, but throughout his career, he's a 254, 294, 431 hitter with a 96 OPS plus. Scope is not good by any stretch of the imagination right now, but he still might be better than Golden Wong. I think the Tigers are still a few years away from competing in that AL Central division, so I give them a few players that are close to the major leagues, but not quite there yet. And if you're taking on all of that salary, I really don't think it would cost all that much for you to go out and acquire these two guys. But of course, if the Tigers think that they're going to be able to keep Eduardo Rodriguez after this year, and he'll be a big part of their playoff push in a few years when they've aged up a little bit, maybe they would never make this trade in the first place. Of course, there are also the young guys down in the minor leagues for the Mariners. We made a video on that on the screen now, talking about all the young players for the Mariners that could come up to fill in Robbie Ray's spot. Check that one out. I appreciate you guys watching this one, and go Mariners.